The stagecoach lurched to a final stop in front of Galesburg's modest depot, and Thea Zimmerman stepped down onto the dusty Illinois street with nothing but a worn carpetbag, $17 in her pocket, and a heart full of stubborn hope that this frontier town would offer her the fresh start she desperately needed. The August sun of 1872 beat down mercilessly on her dark hair, and she could feel the curious stares of passers-by as they took in her travel-stained dress, and the determined set of her jaw that barely concealed her exhaustion. She had left Philadelphia 3 weeks ago after her father's debts had swallowed everything the family owned, and her mother's death the previous winter had left her with no reason to stay in a city that held only painful memories and creditors who wanted blood from stones. The main street of Galesburg stretched before her, a mix of wooden storefronts and brick buildings that suggested a town in transition between its raw frontier days and something more established. A general store, a blacksmith, a hotel that looked more respectable than she had dared to hope, and several saloons lined the thoroughfare. Farmers and ranchers moved along the wooden sidewalks, and she noticed several women in practical calico dresses going about their business with the efficient manner of people who had carved out lives in this prairie land through sheer determination. She picked up her bag and started walking toward the hotel, her legs unsteady after so many days of travel. The bag felt heavier with each step, and she was acutely aware of how little it contained. 2 changes of clothes, her mother's Bible, a daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day, and a bundle of letters from her childhood friend Sarah, who had moved west years ago and had painted such hopeful pictures of life on the frontier. Sarah lived in Kansas now, married to a wheat farmer, and had encouraged Thea to come west when she learned of her friend's desperate circumstances. Galesburg had been as far as Thea's money would take her, and she had decided that hope and determination would have to carry her the rest of the way. She was nearly to the hotel steps when a horse and rider came around the corner too fast, startling her into stumbling backward. The bag fell from her hand, and before she could catch herself, she was sitting in the dirt of the street, her carefully preserved dignity scattered along with the contents of her bag that had spilled open on impact. The rider pulled up immediately, swinging down from his horse with an agility that spoke of years in the saddle. "Madam, I am so sorry. Are you hurt?" His voice carried genuine concern, and when Thea looked up, she found herself staring into the most striking blue eyes she had ever seen. The man was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark blonde hair that curled slightly at the collar of his worn but clean shirt. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, denim trousers, leather chaps dusty from the road, and a hat that he quickly removed as he knelt beside her. "I am fine," Thea said, though her pride was more bruised than anything else. She started gathering her scattered belongings, mortified that this stranger was now witnessing the poverty of her possessions. He immediately began helping, carefully picking up her mother's Bible and handling it with respect as he passed it to her. "I was not watching where I was going," he said. "My horse threw a shoe about 2 miles out, and I was in a hurry to get him to the blacksmith before he went lame. That is no excuse for nearly running you down." He retrieved the daguerreotype that had slid several feet away and studied it for just a moment before handing it to her. "Your parents?" "Yes," Thea said, taking it from him and quickly tucking it back into her bag. His hands, she noticed, were calloused but gentle, the hands of a man who worked hard but with care. He stood and offered her his hand, pulling her to her feet with an ease that made her aware of his strength. She was not a small woman, 5.5 feet tall and solidly built, but he lifted her as if she weighed nothing. Once she was standing, he brushed the dust from his hat absently, his blue eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "I am Wyatt Patterson," he said. "I work on the Three Rivers Ranch about 10 miles north of here. I would be mighty grateful if you would let me buy you dinner at the hotel to make up for my carelessness." Thea hesitated. Every lesson her mother had taught her about propriety warring with the practical reality that she needed to conserve every penny, and a free meal would be a blessing. There was something honest in his face, though, something that made her feel that his offer came from genuine remorse rather than any improper motive. "Thea Zimmerman," she said finally, "and I suppose I could allow that, since you did not actually injure me beyond my dignity." A smile transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made her heart skip unexpectedly. "Your dignity looks intact to me, Miss Zimmerman. You have the bearing of someone who does not surrender easily to circumstances." They walked together toward the hotel, Wyatt leading his limping horse. "Are you visiting someone in Galesburg or just passing through?" he asked. "Neither," Thea said, deciding that honesty would serve her better than pretense. "I am looking for employment. I can read and write. I am good with numbers, and I am willing to work hard at whatever honest labor I can find." She met his eyes directly, refusing to be ashamed of her circumstances. "I arrived with nothing but hope, Mr. Patterson, but I intend to make that enough." Something shifted in his expression, a softening that made him look at her with what seemed like understanding rather than pity. They had reached the hotel, and he tied his horse to the hitching post before turning to her. "Hope is all we need to build our life together in this country," he said quietly. "I came here from Missouri 5 years ago with even less than that, just the clothes on my back and a borrowed horse. Mr. Dalton at Three Rivers took a chance on me when he had no reason to, and I worked my way from stable hand to foreman. If you have hope and the will to work, Miss Zimmerman, you will make your way here." The hotel dining room was modest but clean, with checkered tablecloths on sturdy wooden tables and the smell of roasting meat coming from the kitchen. Wyatt guided her to a table by the window where they could watch the street, and a middle-aged woman with kind eyes came to take their order. Wyatt ordered steak and potatoes for both of them without consulting her, then seemed to catch himself. "Unless you would prefer something else?" he asked. "That sounds wonderful," Thea said honestly. She had been living on bread and cheese for the last week of travel, saving money wherever she could, and the thought of a hot meal made her almost dizzy with anticipation. While they waited for the food, Wyatt asked her about Philadelphia, and she found herself telling him more than she had intended. About her father's shipping business that had failed when 2 of his vessels were lost in a storm, about the creditors who had taken everything including their home, about her mother's decline and death from pneumonia in the bitter cold of a winter when they could not afford coal. She told him about Sarah's letters painting pictures of the West, where land was plentiful and opportunities existed for people willing to work for them, and about her decision to leave behind everything familiar for the chance at a new life. "I do not want pity," she said firmly when she finished. "I just want a fair chance to prove what I am capable of." "I do not pity you," Wyatt said, and his tone made her believe him. "I admire you. It takes courage to leave everything you know and travel alone into unfamiliar territory. Most people would have found some way to stay in what was familiar, even if it was miserable. You chose to take control of your own future." The food arrived, and for a few minutes Thea forgot everything except the pleasure of a well-cooked meal. The steak was tender, the potatoes were seasoned with butter and herbs, and there was fresh bread with honey. She ate with the appetite of someone who had been hungry for too long, and she noticed that Wyatt seemed pleased by her enjoyment rather than shocked by her lack of delicate picking at her food. "Tell me about Galesburg," she said when she had taken the edge off her hunger. What opportunities exist here for someone like me? Wyatt leaned back in his chair, considering. The town is growing. We are on the railroad line, which brings business and people. The school teacher is looking for an assistant because enrollment has grown beyond what she can handle alone. That would suit someone with your education. Mrs. Henderson, who runs the general store, was complaining just last week that she needs help with her bookkeeping. The hotel takes on staff periodically. And then there are always families looking for help with children or household management, though I know that sort of work can be difficult. I would not mind any honest work, Thea said. I can teach. I can keep books. I can cook and clean and mend. I can even handle horses if needed. My father believed in practical education for his daughter, which scandalized some of our neighbors but has served me well. Can you ride? Wyatt asked with interest. I can, though it has been over a year since I had the opportunity. We had to sell our horses early in my father's financial troubles. Wyatt was quiet for a moment, and she could see him thinking something through. 3 Rivers is a large operation, he said finally. Mr. Dalton has been looking for someone to help his wife with managing the household. She is a fine woman, but she is not young anymore, and the work of running a ranch household is considerable. It would include cooking for the hands when we are too far out to come back for meals, managing supplies, keeping the accounts for household expenses, and helping with correspondence. Mrs. Dalton is an educated woman herself, and she values learning. It would not pay a fortune, but it would include room and board in the main house, and the Daltons are fair and kind employers. Hope surged in Thea's chest, almost painful in its intensity. You think she would consider me? I have no references except my own word that I am capable and honest. I think my word might carry some weight with them, Wyatt said. Mr. Dalton trusts my judgment on ranch matters. I could ride out this evening and speak to them, then bring you out tomorrow to meet them if they are willing. He paused. I should warn you that ranch life is isolated. 3 Rivers is 10 miles from town, and during certain seasons we might only come in once a month for supplies. Some women find the loneliness difficult. I am not afraid of isolation, Thea said. I am afraid of destitution and dependence. If I can earn my way honestly and build something for my future, I will gladly embrace whatever challenges come with that. They finished their meal, and Wyatt insisted on paying for a room for her at the hotel for the night, despite her protests that she could manage. Consider it part of my apology for nearly trampling you, he said with a smile that made something warm unfurl in her chest. Besides, I cannot in good conscience recommend you to the Daltons if I have left you sleeping in the street. It would reflect poorly on my judgment. After they parted ways with plans to meet in the morning, Thea climbed the stairs to her small but clean room and sat on the bed, hardly daring to believe that her first day in Galesburg had resulted in the possibility of employment. She thought about Wyatt Patterson, about the kindness in his blue eyes and the quiet confidence in the way he moved and spoke. He was clearly a man who had worked his way up through determination and ability, who understood what it meant to arrive with nothing and build something through effort and hope. She washed her face and hands in the basin, changed into her nightgown, and lay down on the bed that felt impossibly soft after weeks of hard travel. Through the window, she could hear the sounds of the town settling in for the evening. Horses on the street, voices from the saloons, the distant whistle of a train. Somewhere out beyond the town lights, Wyatt Patterson was riding through the prairie darkness to 3 Rivers Ranch, and she found herself hoping with an intensity that surprised her that the Daltons would agree to meet her. The next morning Thea was awake before dawn, too nervous to sleep. She washed and dressed in her best remaining dress, a dark blue cotton that had seen better days but was clean and neatly mended. She brushed and pinned up her hair, pinched her cheeks for color, and went downstairs to wait in the hotel lobby, too anxious to eat breakfast despite the smells coming from the dining room. Wyatt arrived mid-morning, riding a different horse than the one from yesterday. This one was a beautiful chestnut mare with intelligent eyes and a coat that gleamed with good care. He swung down and smiled when he saw her waiting. "Good news," he said. "Mrs. Dalton is eager to meet you. She said any young woman brave enough to travel alone from Philadelphia to Illinois is worth talking to." He looked at her dress and nodded approvingly. "You look very presentable, Miss Zimmerman. Are you ready for a ride out to the ranch?" "I do not have a horse," Thea said, though her heart was sinking at the thought of what a horse might cost if she did get the position. "I brought Jenny here for you," Wyatt said, patting the mare's neck. "She is gentle but spirited, and she will give you an honest ride." "I will be on my usual mount." He gestured to where another horse was tied, a tall gelding with a dark coat and white markings on his face. Thea approached the mare carefully, holding out her hand for the horse to sniff. Jenny investigated her politely, then allowed Thea to stroke her neck. The feel of the horse under her hands brought back memories of happier times, riding through Fairmount Park with her father on Sunday afternoons before everything fell apart. "It has been a while," she admitted. "I may be rusty." "She will take care of you," Wyatt assured her. He helped her mount, his hand steady at her waist as he lifted her into the saddle. The touch was proper and brief, but Thea felt a warmth spread through her from where his hands had been. Once she was settled, Wyatt mounted his own horse with easy grace, and they set off north out of Galesburg. The prairie spread out around them in rolling waves of grass and crops, broken by clusters of trees and the occasional farmhouse. The August sun was already warm, but a breeze kept the heat bearable. Wyatt rode beside her, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the area. Three Rivers Ranch was so named because it lay near the confluence of three small tributaries that fed into the larger river system. Mr. Dalton had established the ranch 15 years ago when the area was still fairly wild, and he had built it into one of the most successful cattle operations in the region. "He is a fair man," Wyatt said. "Firm but fair. He expects hard work and honesty, and in return he pays well and treats his people right. Mrs. Dalton is the heart of the operation, though. She keeps everything running smoothly, and she has a gift for making people feel valued. They never had children of their own, which I think is a sadness to them both, but they treat their employees almost like family." "How long have you been foreman?" Thea asked. 2 years now. Mr. Dalton promoted me when his previous foreman retired and moved to California to be near his daughter. It was a leap of faith on his part. I was only 23, and there were older men who probably thought they should have gotten the position. But I had worked harder than anyone, learned everything I could about cattle and horses and land management, and I think he saw that I was committed to Three Rivers for the long term. "Do you plan to have your own ranch someday?" Thea asked. Wyatt was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the horizon. "I have been saving my wages and learning all I can. Someday, yes, I would like to have my own land. Nothing as large as Three Rivers, but enough to run a good herd and build something lasting. Land is still available here if you have the capital and the knowledge to work it properly. Maybe in another 5 years or so I will be ready." They rode in companionable silence for a while, and Thea felt herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse's movement. Jenny was indeed a good horse, responsive but forgiving of any mistakes in Thea's somewhat rusty horsemanship. The prairie around them was beautiful in a way that was completely different from Philadelphia's urban landscape. Here everything was sky and grass and space, a sense of openness that was both exhilarating and slightly intimidating. Three Rivers Ranch came into view over a rise, and Thea drew in her breath at the scope of it. The main house was a large two-story structure built of wood and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around at least two sides. Nearby stood a substantial barn, several outbuildings, corrals full of horses and cattle, and a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. Everything was well-maintained and prosperous-looking, speaking of careful management and successful operation. As they rode into the yard, a man emerged from the barn and waved to Wyatt. He was in his 50s, Thea guessed, with silver threading through his dark hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent his life outdoors. He moved with the slightly stiff gait of old injuries or hard work taking their toll on a body, but his eyes were sharp and assessing as he watched them approach. "This must be Miss Zimmerman," he said as Wyatt helped Thea dismount. "I am James Dalton. Welcome to Three Rivers." "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, Mr. Dalton," Thea said, shaking his offered hand. His grip was firm but not crushing, and she met his eyes directly, knowing that the impression she made in these first moments would be crucial. "Wyatt tells me you traveled from Philadelphia on your own," Mr. Dalton said. "That takes courage." "It takes desperation," Thea corrected honestly. "But I like to think I also have courage, along with a strong willingness to work hard and prove my worth." Something that might have been approval flickered in Mr. Dalton's eyes. "Honesty is a quality I value highly, Miss Zimmerman. Come up to the house and meet my wife. She will want to talk with you and decide if you might suit our needs here." The interior of the ranch house was even more impressive than the exterior. The main room had high ceilings with exposed beams, comfortable furniture that showed signs of good care and use, and windows that let in abundant light. The floor was polished wood covered with woven rugs, and there were books on shelves along one wall. Everything spoke of people who valued both comfort and culture, who had brought civilization to the frontier without losing practicality. Mrs. Dalton appeared from what was presumably the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She was a woman in her early 50s with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun and warm brown eyes that assessed Thea with intelligence and kindness. She was what Thea's mother would have called handsome rather than pretty, with strong features and the upright bearing of someone confident in themselves and their place in the world. "Miss Zimmerman," she said, her voice cultured and welcoming. "I am Catherine Dalton. Please sit down. Would you like some tea or coffee?" "Tea would be lovely, thank you," Thea said, sitting in the chair Mrs. Dalton indicated. The older woman disappeared into the kitchen and returned shortly with a tray holding a teapot, cups, and a plate of cookies. As she poured, Thea noticed that the tea service was fine china, delicate and beautiful. "Those belong to my grandmother," Mrs. Dalton said, noticing Thea's appreciation. "I brought them west with me when James and I married, and they have survived everything the frontier could throw at them through careful packing and perhaps a bit of luck." She settled into her chair and studied Thea. "Now, tell me about yourself." "Wyatt gave me the broad strokes of your situation, but I would like to hear it from you." For the second time in as many days, Thea found herself telling her story. She was honest about her father's failures and the family's subsequent destitution, about her mother's death, and about her decision to come west. She did not dramatize or seek sympathy, simply laid out the facts and explained what skills she could offer in return for fair employment. "I can keep accurate accounts," she said. "I can cook, though I will admit my experience has been primarily in managing household staff who did the actual cooking rather than doing it all myself. I can read and write well, and I have a fair hand for correspondence." I am willing to learn whatever tasks you need done, and I am not afraid of hard work or difficult conditions." Mrs. Dalton sipped her tea thoughtfully. "This ranch is not Philadelphia, Miss Zimmerman. The work is constant and often physically demanding. During roundup and branding season, I may be cooking for 20 men 3 times a day, preparing meals that have to be transported out to where they are working. During winter storms, I may be up at all hours helping with difficult births among the cattle or treating injuries among the hands. We are 10 miles from town, and there are weeks when I speak to no one except my husband and the ranch employees. There are no theaters, no social gatherings beyond church once a week when the weather permits, no shops to browse. Many women find such a life unbearably lonely." "I do not need theaters or shops," Thea said firmly. "I need purpose and security. I need to know that I am earning my way and building toward a future rather than being dependent on charity or making desperate choices. If the work is hard, then I will work hard. If the isolation is challenging, then I will meet that challenge." Mrs. Dalton and her husband exchanged a look that seemed to communicate volumes. Then Mrs. Dalton smiled. "Wyatt also mentioned that you have some experience with horses." "Yes, madam. I learned to ride as a child and I am comfortable around horses. I do not have experience with cattle, but I am willing to learn if such knowledge would be useful." "It would be," Mr. Dalton said. "Everyone on this ranch contributes where they can during busy seasons. Catherine has pulled more than one calf during difficult births, and she can rope nearly as well as any of my hands." There was clear pride in his voice. "We are partners in this operation, and we need someone who can be a partner as well, someone who will see what needs doing and do it without being told." "I believe I can be that person," Thea said. "Give me a trial period. A month, perhaps. If at the end of that time you feel I am not suited to the work or the life, I will leave without complaint, but I think you will find that I am capable of more than my background might suggest." Mrs. Dalton stood and extended her hand. "Very well, Miss Zimmerman. You have your self-employment. We will provide a room in the main house, 3 meals a day, and $20 a month. Half of Sunday is yours to do with as you wish, and you may ride into town twice a month if you need to purchase personal items or send correspondence. The rest of the time, I will expect your full attention to the work of this household. Does that seem fair?" Thea stood as well, shaking Mrs. Dalton's hand with a grip as firm as the one she had given Mr. Dalton. "More than fair, madam. When would you like me to start?" "Today, if you can arrange it. I know you have a room at the hotel, but Wyatt can bring your belongings out this afternoon if you would like to begin familiarizing yourself with the house and our routine." "Today would be perfect," Thea said, hardly daring to believe that her fortunes had changed so dramatically in less than 24 hours. Wyatt rode with her back to Galesburg, and on the return journey, Thea found herself watching him more carefully. He sat his horse with the unconscious grace of someone completely at home in the saddle, his eyes constantly scanning the land around them with the awareness of someone responsible for its management. When he caught her watching him, he smiled. "You handled that well," he said. "The Daltons can be intimidating, especially Mrs. Dalton. She is as sharp as they come and does not suffer fools. The fact that she hired you on the spot says a great deal about the impression you made." "I had good motivation," Thea said, "and I was telling the truth. I am not afraid of hard work or isolation. In fact, I think I might welcome both after the chaos and disappointment of the last few years. You will find both at 3 Rivers, Wyatt assured her, but you will also find something else. A sense of purpose and accomplishment that comes from building something real and lasting. The Daltons have created a life here that means something, and everyone who works for them is part of that creation. It is satisfying in a way that goes deeper than just earning wages. They collected Thea's belongings from the hotel, which took only minutes since she had so little, and then rode back to Three Rivers. Mrs. Dalton showed Thea to her room, a small but pleasant space on the second floor with a window overlooking the ranch yard and the prairie beyond. There was a bed with a real mattress and quilts, a chest of drawers, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, and a small desk with a chair. To Thea, who had been uncertain where she would sleep that very morning, it seemed impossibly luxurious. "Take an hour to settle in and rest from the ride, Mrs. Dalton said. Then come downstairs and I will begin teaching you our routine. I should warn you that you are arriving at our busiest season. We will be starting the fall roundup in a few weeks, which means preparations must be made and supplies laid in. You will be thrown into the deep water, I am afraid. I would prefer to be useful immediately rather than have idle time to doubt myself," Thea said. Mrs. Dalton studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I think you and I are going to work well together, Miss Zimmerman. I have a good feeling about this arrangement." The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity that left Thea exhausted every night but deeply satisfied. Mrs. Dalton was a thorough teacher who explained not just what needed to be done, but why, helping Thea understand the broader context of ranch management. She learned to prepare substantial meals for the ranch hands, to manage supplies so that they always had what they needed without waste, to keep detailed accounts of household expenses and inventory. She learned which horses were dependable for different types of work, and which needed special handling, how to treat common injuries and ailments, and how to read the signs of changing weather that could impact ranch operations. She also learned about the people who made Three Rivers function. There were 12 regular ranch hands plus Wyatt, men ranging in age from 18 to nearly 60, all of whom had their own personalities and preferences. There was Tom, the older cowboy who had been with Mr. Dalton since the beginning and who knew more about cattle than seemed possible. There was young Charlie, only 19, who was still learning but eager and quick. There was Eduardo, who had come up from Mexico 5 years ago and who could break horses with a patience and skill that seemed almost magical. Each of them treated Thea with courtesy once they understood she was not going to lord her position over them or shirk any work that needed doing. Wyatt she saw every day, usually at meals when he came in with the hands or in the evenings when he reported to Mr. Dalton on the day's work. He always had a smile for her, and often a quiet word of encouragement if he found her struggling with some new task. She found herself looking forward to his presence, to the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, to the sound of his voice as he talked about the ranch and the land and plans for the future. One evening about 3 weeks after she had arrived, Wyatt found her sitting on the porch after supper, looking out at the sunset painting the prairie in shades of gold and orange. He settled onto the steps beside her, his hat in his hands. "How are you settling in?" he asked. Honestly, not just the polite answer you give Mrs. Dalton. Thea considered the question seriously. "I am exhausted," she admitted. "Every muscle in my body aches and I fall asleep the moment my head hits the pillow, but I am also happier than I have been in years. I feel useful here. I feel like I am building something rather than just watching everything collapse around me. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Wyatt said. "That is exactly how I felt when I first came here. Like I had finally found a place where effort and determination actually mattered, where I could see the results of my work and know that I was contributing to something larger than myself." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the sun sank lower and the first stars began to appear. Finally, Wyatt said, "I want to thank you." "Thank me," Thea turned to him in surprise. "For what?" "For proving me right," he said with a smile. "I recommended you to the Daltons based on nothing more than a gut feeling and one conversation. If you had not worked out, it would have reflected poorly on my judgment. Instead, Mrs. Dalton told Mr. Dalton that you are the best help she has had in years. Said you have a natural talent for organization and management that cannot be taught." Thea felt her cheeks warm with pleasure. "I am glad I have not disappointed anyone, especially you. You took a chance on a complete stranger, and I am grateful for that chance." "You are not a complete stranger anymore," Wyatt said quietly. His blue eyes held hers in the dimming light. "I feel like I know you better after 3 weeks than I know people I have worked alongside for years. You are honest and direct, you work harder than you should probably push yourself, and you care about doing things right rather than just adequately. Those are qualities I admire." "I could say the same about you," Thea said, her heart beating faster at the intensity in his gaze. "You could have ridden past me that day in town. Many men would have. Instead, you stopped and helped and went out of your way to assist someone who could do nothing for you in return. That speaks to your character." "I could do nothing else," Wyatt said. "You were alone and in need of help, and I had the means to provide it. Besides, I think I knew even then that you were someone special, someone worth knowing." He stood abruptly, as if he had said more than he intended. "I should let you rest. Tomorrow will be another long day." After he left, Thea remained on the porch, her mind whirling with the implications of that conversation. There had been something in Wyatt's voice and eyes that suggested his interest in her went beyond mere friendship or professional regard. The thought both thrilled and frightened her. She had not come west looking for romance. She had come looking for independence and security. But she could not deny the way her pulse quickened when Wyatt was near, or the way she found excuses to be where she might encounter him during the day. The fall roundup began in early September, and Thea discovered what Mrs. Dalton had meant about the work becoming even more demanding. Every able-bodied person on the ranch was involved in gathering the cattle that had ranged across thousands of acres during the summer, sorting them, branding the new calves, and selecting which animals would be sold and which kept for breeding stock. Thea's role was to prepare enormous quantities of food and transport it to wherever the hands were working, often miles from the main house. She learned to drive a wagon loaded with supplies, following rough tracks across the prairie to reach temporary camps where the hands were working cattle. She learned to cook over an open fire, to make bread in a Dutch oven buried in coals, to prepare beans and beef and biscuits for hungry men who needed substantial fuel for the grueling work they were doing. Her hands became rough and calloused, her skin tanned despite the bonnet she wore, and she lost the last softness of her Philadelphia life. Wyatt was everywhere during the roundup, managing the complex operation with a competence that was impressive to watch. He could rope and brand, doctor sick cattle, break up fights between temperamental bulls, and keep track of which animals had been processed and which still needed attention. He worked from before dawn until after dark, and Thea could see the toll it took in the lines of exhaustion on his face when he finally stopped for meals. One afternoon, when she brought supplies to the camp, she found him limping as he walked to the wagon. "What happened?" she asked, immediately concerned. "Just a disagreement with a steer who objected to being branded," Wyatt said, trying to smile. "He caught me with his hoof when I was not paying enough attention. It is nothing serious." "Let me see," Thea demanded. When he hesitated, she fixed him with the firm look she had seen Mrs. Dalton use to good effect. "Wyatt Patterson, if that injury becomes infected because you were too stubborn to let someone treat it, you will be no good to anyone. Sit down and let me look at it." He sat, and she could see him fighting amusement at her commanding tone. She knelt beside him and examined the injury, which was a nasty gash on his shin that had bled through his pants. It needed to be cleaned and bandaged properly, and she told him so in no uncertain terms. "You sound like Mrs. Dalton," he said. "Good. Then perhaps you will listen." She retrieved the medical supplies she always carried in the wagon and set about cleaning the wound. He hissed in pain when she applied the antiseptic solution, but he did not pull away. His leg was muscular and solid under her hands, and she tried not to think about the intimacy of tending to him this way. When she had finished bandaging the injury, she sat back on her heels. "There. Keep it clean and watch for signs of infection. If it starts to look red or swollen, or if you develop a fever, you need to see a doctor in town." "Yes, madam," Wyatt said, but his eyes were soft as he looked at her. "Thank you, Thea." It was the first time he had used her given name without the formal Miss Zimmerman, and the sound of it in his voice did strange things to her composure. "You are welcome," she managed. "Now go eat something before you fall over from exhaustion." The roundup lasted 3 weeks, and by the time it was finished, everyone on the ranch was worn to the bone. But there was also a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. The cattle count was good, the calves were healthy, and the animals selected for sale would bring a strong price at market. Mr. Dalton announced a day of rest for everyone and doubled wages for the month as a bonus, which had the hands cheering and clapping each other on the back. That night, with the work finally done, Thea allowed herself to truly relax for the first time since the roundup began. She took a long bath in the large copper tub in the kitchen, washing away weeks of dust and smoke and exhaustion, then put on a clean dress and brushed out her hair until it shone. She felt almost human again, and the face that looked back at her from the small mirror in her room was not quite the same one that had arrived in Galesburg. Her skin was darker from the sun, her cheeks had more color, and her eyes seemed brighter and more alive. She looked like someone who belonged in this place, someone who had earned her place through effort and determination. She went downstairs and found the house quiet. Mr. and Mrs. Dalton had retired early, exhausted from the intensive work of the past weeks. Thea stepped out onto the porch, thinking she might sit in the cool evening air for a while before bed. She was surprised to find Wyatt there, leaning against the porch railing and looking out at the stars. "I thought you would be asleep," she said softly, not wanting to disturb him if he wanted solitude. He turned and his breath seemed to catch when he saw her. "I was too restless to sleep. Sometimes after a big push like the roundup, it takes a day or two to settle back into normal rhythms." He gestured to the space beside him. "Join me." She moved to stand next to him, and they looked out at the prairie together. The night was clear and cool, with a brilliant canopy of stars overhead that seemed close enough to touch. The sounds of the ranch settling for the evening surrounded them, horses shifting in the corrals, cattle lowing in the distance, an owl calling from somewhere in the darkness. "I never saw stars like this in Philadelphia," Thea said. "There was always too much smoke and light from the city. Here they seem infinite." "One of the things I love most about this life," Wyatt said. "Standing under these stars makes you realize how small you are, but also how your choices matter. Each decision we make creates ripples that spread outward, affecting others and shaping the future in ways we cannot always predict." "Is that your way of talking philosophy, Mr. Patterson?" Thea asked with a smile. "Maybe. Or maybe I am working up the courage to make a decision of my own." He turned to face her, his expression serious in the starlight. "Thea, I need to tell you something, and I ask that you hear me out before you respond." Her heart began to pound, sensing that whatever he was about to say would be significant. "All right. When I nearly ran you down in Galesburg, I thought you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, he said. Even dusty and tired from travel, there was something about you that caught my attention. The way you held yourself, the intelligence in your eyes, the determined set of your jaw. I helped you because it was the right thing to do, but I also helped you because I wanted an excuse to talk to you more. Thea opened her mouth to respond, but he held up a hand. Please, let me finish before I lose my nerve. These past weeks working alongside you, watching you adapt to a life completely different from anything you knew before, seeing your determination and kindness, and the way you throw yourself into every task with complete commitment, I have fallen in love with you. Not the surface attraction I felt that first day, but something deeper and more real than I ever imagined feeling. You are everything I admire and respect, and I want to build a life with you. He took her hands in his, and she could feel them trembling slightly. I know I am just a ranch foreman with modest savings and uncertain prospects. I cannot offer you luxury or the culture and refinement you grew up with, but I can offer you honesty and loyalty and all of my effort to build something lasting together. You said you arrived with nothing but hope. I told you that hope is all we need to build our life together, and I meant it. I am asking you to take that chance with me, Thea, to marry me and let us build our future side by side. Thea felt tears welling in her eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sadness. She had not realized how much she had come to love Wyatt until this moment when he was offering her everything she had not dared to hope for. Not rescue or charity, but partnership and shared purpose with a man she respected and admired as much as she loved him. Wyatt, she said, her voice thick with emotion, I have fallen in love with you too. Every day I wake up and look forward to seeing you, to hearing your voice and your ideas, to working alongside you toward common goals. You are everything I did not know I was searching for when I left Philadelphia. You are strong but gentle, ambitious but patient, and you see me as a partner rather than someone to be protected or managed. Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I want to build a life with you and share whatever challenges and joys the future brings. He pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, feeling the solid strength of him and the rapid beating of his heart that matched her own. When he kissed her, it was tender and passionate at once, full of promise and barely restrained desire. She kissed him back with all the feeling she had been holding inside, pouring her love and hope and commitment into that embrace. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wyatt rested his forehead against hers. I want to do this right, he said. Court you properly, give you time to be certain, have a real wedding with your friends present. I do not need time to be certain, Thea said. I am as certain as I have ever been about anything. But I appreciate that you want to honor the proprieties. We can have a proper engagement and wedding if that is important to you. It is important to me that everyone knows I value you, and that this is not some hasty decision made in the heat of the moment, Wyatt said. You deserve to be courted and celebrated, not rushed into something because circumstances pushed us together. They talked for hours that night, sitting on the porch and making plans for their future. Wyatt explained that he had saved nearly $500 from his wages over the years, and that Mr. Dalton had offered to sell him 200 acres of ranch land at a fair price when he was ready to start his own operation. With Thea's help managing both the household and business aspects, they could build something substantial within a few years. I want us to be partners in every sense, Wyatt said. Your intelligence and organizational skills are as valuable as my knowledge of ranching. Together we can build something that neither of us could achieve alone. That is all I have ever wanted, Thea said. To be seen as a full partner, to have my contributions valued, to build something meaningful rather than just existing on the margins of someone else's life. The next morning they told the Daltons their news, and the older couple was delighted. Mrs. Dalton embraced Thea warmly. "I suspected something was developing between you two," she said with a smile. "I am so pleased. You are both such good people, and you will be wonderful together." Mr. Dalton shook Wyatt's hand firmly. "I am happy for you both, and I want you to know that my offer of land still stands. In fact, I have been thinking about it, and I would like to propose a partnership arrangement. You continue working as foreman here while you establish your own herd on the land I sell you. 3 Rivers can provide the initial cattle at cost, and you can graze them on our range while you build up your operation. In 5 years or so, you should be established enough to work your own place full-time. It will give you security while you build your future." It was a generous offer that would make their dreams achievable much sooner than they had dared hope. Wyatt accepted gratefully, and plans began to take shape. They would marry in early November, after the fall work was complete, but before winter set in. That would give them time to prepare properly, and for Thea to write to her friend Sarah, who promised to come from Kansas for the wedding despite the distance. The next weeks were full of preparation and anticipation. Thea sewed a new dress for the wedding, a beautiful deep green silk that Mrs. Dalton had insisted on buying for her in town. Mrs. Dalton also gifted her with a delicate lace veil that had been in her own family for generations. "I always hoped I would have a daughter to pass this to," she said with tears in her eyes. "You have become like a daughter to me in these few months, Thea. Please accept this with my blessing." Wyatt spent his spare time building furniture for the small house they would live in on the ranch property. Mr. Dalton had given them permission to build a cabin on the section of land that would eventually be their own, and Wyatt worked with determined focus to create something comfortable and sturdy. He made a bed frame, a table and chairs, shelves for Thea's books, and a chest for storing linens. Each piece was crafted with care, and Thea loved watching him work, seeing the way his hands shaped wood into useful, beautiful things. Sarah arrived 2 days before the wedding, and Thea wept with joy at seeing her childhood friend again. Sarah had changed from the girl Thea remembered, tanned and capable looking in practical frontier clothing, but her warm heart and quick smile were unchanged. She approved of Wyatt immediately after meeting him. "He looks at you like you hung the moon," Sarah told Thea when they had a moment alone. "And you look happier than I have ever seen you. I am so glad you found each other." The wedding took place on a beautiful November morning, cool and crisp with brilliant sunshine. Reverend Matthews from the church in Galesburg performed the ceremony in the ranch house parlor, with the Daltons, Sarah, and all the ranch hands in attendance. Thea wore her green silk dress with Mrs. Dalton's veil, and she carried a bouquet of late-season wildflowers that Charlie had ridden 5 miles to collect. Wyatt wore his best suit, and when Thea came down the stairs to stand beside him, the love in his eyes made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. They exchanged vows in steady voices, promising to love and honor each other, to be partners in all things, to face whatever challenges came together. When Wyatt kissed her as his wife, the ranch hands cheered and Mrs. Dalton cried happy tears. The celebration that followed included a feast that had taken days to prepare, music from Eduardo's guitar, and dancing that lasted until the stars came out. Finally, as the party was winding down, Wyatt took Thea's hand and led her to their new cabin. He had lit lanterns inside so it glowed warmly in the darkness, and when they crossed the threshold, he lifted her into his arms and carried her inside. "Welcome home, Mrs. Patterson," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Home," Thea repeated, looking around at the space they would share. It was small but beautiful, filled with the furniture Wyatt had made and the household items they had accumulated. Most importantly, it was theirs, built by their own hands and representing their shared future. "I love it. I love you." That night, they became husband and wife in every sense, and Thea discovered a passion and intimacy that she had never imagined. Wyatt was gentle but eager, patient but ardent, and he made her feel cherished and desired in equal measure. Afterward, they lay together in the bed he had built, and Thea thought about the journey that had brought her from desperate poverty in Philadelphia to this moment of perfect happiness on an Illinois prairie. "I keep thinking that if things had been different, if my father's ships had not been lost, or if I had stayed in Philadelphia, I never would have met you," she said softly. "All that pain and loss led me here to you. I cannot regret it, even though it was so hard at the time." "I feel the same," Wyatt said, his arms tightening around her. "If I had not left Missouri when I did, if Mr. Dalton had not given me a chance, if I had been looking the other way that day in Galesburg, we might have passed each other by. Instead, we found each other at exactly the right moment, when we were both ready to build something new." The winter that followed was the happiest time of Thea's life. She and Wyatt settled into married life with an ease that came from genuine compatibility and shared goals. They both continued working for the Daltons while establishing their own small herd on the land Mr. Dalton had sold them. Wyatt taught Thea everything about cattle ranching, from selecting good breeding stock to treating common ailments to managing grazing patterns. She proved to be a quick learner with good instincts, and Wyatt often told her that she had a natural talent for the work. In turn, Thea managed their finances and correspondence, keeping careful records of expenses and income, planning for the future with the same organizational skills that had impressed Mrs. Dalton. She also discovered a talent for negotiation when it came time to sell their first calves, securing a better price than Wyatt had expected by carefully timing the sale and understanding the market conditions. By the time their first anniversary arrived, they owned 50 head of cattle, had money saved in the bank, and were ready to expand their operation. More importantly, Thea discovered she was pregnant, and the joy on Wyatt's face when she told him made her heart overflow with love. "A baby," he said, his hand trembling slightly as he rested it on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Thea, you have given me everything I ever wanted in life and things I did not even know to want: a partner, a home, a future, and now a family." "We have given these things to each other," Thea corrected. "That is what partnership means. Neither of us could have done this alone, but together we have built something wonderful." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter and into the spring. Mrs. Dalton fussed over Thea, insisting she not work too hard and sharing wisdom from her experience helping with births on the ranch over the years. Sarah wrote regularly with advice and encouragement. Wyatt was attentive and protective without being overbearing, understanding that Thea needed to continue working and contributing rather than being treated as fragile. In June of 1874, Thea gave birth to a healthy boy they named William James Patterson, after both their fathers. The birth was difficult, but Thea came through it well with Mrs. Dalton's experienced help. Wyatt cried when he held his son for the first time, this strong, capable man reduced to tears by the tiny life they had created together. "He is perfect," Wyatt said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for him. Thank you for everything." William was a happy baby who thrived from the start. He had his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair, and watching him grow became the center of their world even as they continued building their ranch operation. By the time William was 2, they had expanded to 100 head of cattle, and had built a larger house to replace the original cabin. Thea managed the household and accounts while also helping with the ranch work, often with William strapped to her back or playing nearby under careful supervision. In 1876, their second child was born, a daughter they named Catherine Rose after Mrs. Dalton and Thea's mother. She was a bright-eyed baby with a fierce cry and a determined personality that reminded everyone of her mother. Wyatt doted on his daughter, and Thea laughed watching her tough rancher husband turn to putty in the hands of a tiny girl. The years that followed were full of hard work and steady growth. They added horses to their operation, breeding and training mounts that gained a reputation for quality. Wyatt's skills and reputation grew, and Patterson Ranch became known as a place of fair dealing and excellent stock. Thea's management kept them profitable even in difficult years when cattle prices dropped or weather impacted production. They faced challenges along the way. There was a drought in 1878 that tested their water resources and required difficult decisions about herd size. There was a bitter winter in 1880 when they lost several head of cattle despite their best efforts. There were illnesses and injuries, setbacks and disappointments. But they faced everything together, drawing strength from each other and from the life they had built. In 1881, their third child was born, another son they named Thomas Edward. He was a quiet baby who grew into a thoughtful boy, different from his more outgoing siblings but loved just as fiercely. With 3 children and a thriving ranch operation, life was busy and sometimes chaotic, but Thea could not imagine being happier. The Daltons remained close friends and mentors, watching the Patterson family grow with pride and affection. When Mr. Dalton's health began to fail in the mid-1880s, he made clear his intention to leave a significant portion of 3 Rivers to Wyatt and Thea, recognizing that they had been like the children he and Catherine never had. Mrs. Dalton survived her husband by 3 years, and when she passed peacefully in her sleep in 1889, Thea mourned her as deeply as she would have mourned her own mother. By 1890, Patterson Ranch encompassed 1,500 acres and was one of the most successful operations in the region. They employed a dozen hands year-round and more during busy seasons. Their children were growing into capable young people who worked alongside their parents and were being educated both in practical ranch skills and in academics through a tutor who came from Galesburg 3 times a week. William, at 16, was already showing the leadership qualities that would make him an excellent rancher. He had his father's work ethic and his mother's head for business, and he talked about expanding into new breeds of cattle that might be better suited to changing market conditions. Catherine, at 14, was a skilled horsewoman who could outride most of the ranch hands and who had inherited both her parents' determination. Thomas, at 9, was the thinker of the family, always reading and asking questions, and Thea thought he might be the one to pursue education beyond the ranch, perhaps becoming a lawyer or teacher. One evening in late summer, Thea and Wyatt sat on the porch of their house, watching the sunset paint the sky in magnificent colors. The children were doing evening chores, their voices carrying across the yard as they laughed and worked together. Inside, supper was ready and waiting. The cattle were fat and healthy in the pastures. The accounts showed another profitable year. Everything they had worked for was bearing fruit. "You ever think about that day in Galesburg?" Wyatt asked, reaching for Thea's hand. They were both in their 40s now, no longer young but still strong and capable, their faces lined by sun and work but their eyes still bright with purpose. "I think about it often," Thea said. "I was so desperate and afraid, trying to convince myself that hope would be enough when I had no idea if that was true. And then you nearly ran me down with your horse, and everything changed. You arrived with nothing but hope, Wyatt said, the same words he had spoken to her all those years ago. And I told you that hope was all we needed to build our life together. I believed it then, but I did not know how true it would prove to be. We have built something remarkable, Thea. Not just this ranch or our financial success, but our family, our partnership, our life. We took hope and determination and turned it into something lasting and meaningful. We did it together, Thea said, squeezing his hand. Every step of the way, we have been partners in the truest sense. You never made me feel less capable because I was a woman. You never dismissed my ideas or tried to control me. You stood beside me and let me be fully myself while supporting me completely. That is the greatest gift you could have given me. You gave me the same gift, Wyatt said. You believed in me when I was just a ranch foreman with big dreams and small means. You worked alongside me without complaint through droughts and hard winters and all the challenges this life brings. You gave me children and a home and a purpose beyond just surviving. You made my life rich in ways I never imagined possible. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence that only comes from years of deep knowing and understanding. Finally, Wyatt said, I want to make sure our children understand something important. I want them to know that success is not just about accumulating land or money, though those things have their place. Real success is about building a life that has meaning and purpose, about creating something with someone you love that makes both of you better than you would be alone. That is the legacy I want to leave them. Then we will tell them that, Thea said. We will make sure they understand that hope and hard work and partnership are the foundations of anything lasting. We will teach them to value character over wealth, integrity over expedience, and love over everything else. And we will show them by example, because that is what we have been doing all along. As the years continued to pass, Thea and Wyatt watched their children grow into adulthood and begin building their own lives. William married a smart, capable woman from a neighboring ranch in 1896, and together they took over management of a section of Patterson Ranch, introducing new techniques and approaches while respecting the foundation his parents had built. Catherine surprised everyone by falling in love with a veterinarian who had moved to Galesburg from Chicago. And after they married in 1898, they established a practice that served ranches throughout the region. Thomas pursued his education, attending university in Illinois and then law school, eventually returning to Galesburg to practice law and represent the interests of ranchers and farmers in the changing legal landscape. By the turn of the century, Thea and Wyatt were grandparents 3 times over, with more grandchildren on the way. They had gradually turned over daily management of the ranch to William and his wife, though they still remained active and involved. The ranch had grown to encompass over 3,000 acres and was recognized as one of the premier cattle operations in Illinois. One day, in 1903, Thea found herself walking across land that had been part of Three Rivers Ranch when she first arrived all those years ago. It was now Patterson land, bought fair and square and transformed by decades of careful stewardship. She thought about the terrified young woman who had stepped off a stagecoach in Galesburg with nothing but $17 and desperate hope. She thought about the cowboy who had nearly run her down and then changed the entire trajectory of her life by offering kindness and opportunity. Wyatt found her there, as he always seemed to find her when she needed him. He was in his 50s now, his hair silver at the temples and his face weathered by decades in the sun, but his blue eyes were as bright as ever and his smile still made her heart skip. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, putting his arm around her waist. "About how far we have come," Thea said. About all the moments and decisions and twists of fate that brought us to this place, about how grateful I am for everything we have built together. I am grateful too, Wyatt said. Every single day, I wake up grateful that I was riding too fast that day in town, and that you were brave enough to come west, and that we found each other when we did. He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. I love you, Thea Patterson. I have loved you since the day I met you, and I will love you until the day I die and beyond if such things are possible. I love you too, Thea said, tears welling in her eyes even after all these years together. You are the best decision I ever made, the greatest blessing of my life. Everything good that has happened started with you. They kissed there in the prairie sunshine, two people who had taken hope and hard work and built a legacy that would endure for generations. Around them stretched land they had transformed through effort and vision. Behind them was a lifetime of memories, challenges overcome, joys shared, and love that had deepened with each passing year. Ahead of them stretched whatever years remained, and they would face them together as they had faced everything else. That evening, the entire Patterson family gathered for Sunday supper, a tradition that had begun when William married, and that had expanded as the family grew. The large dining room of the main house was full of people. Wyatt and Thea at the heads of the table, their children and their spouses, 5 grandchildren ranging from infancy to 8 years old, several of the longtime ranch hands who had become like family, and a few neighbors who had been invited to share the meal. The table was laden with food that Thea and her daughters-in-law had prepared: roast beef and potatoes, fresh bread, vegetables from the garden, pies made from preserved fruit. The talk was loud and full of laughter, people sharing stories of the week's work and making plans for the days ahead. The grandchildren wiggled and squirmed, eager to finish eating so they could go play, while the adults lingered over coffee and dessert. When the meal was winding down and the children had been excused, William raised his glass. "I want to propose a toast," he said, and the table gradually fell quiet. "To my parents, who built everything we have from nothing but determination and hope. They taught us by example what it means to work hard, to face challenges with courage, to value people over profit, and to build something lasting and meaningful. Everything good in our lives started with their decision to take a chance on each other and on this land. To Ma and Pa." Everyone raised their glasses, and Thea felt tears sliding down her cheeks as she looked around at all these beloved faces. This was what they had built, not just land and cattle and financial success, but a family rooted in love and shared values, a community of people who supported and cared for each other. This was the real legacy, more valuable than any amount of money or property. Later, after everyone had left and the house was quiet, Thea and Wyatt prepared for bed. It was a routine they had followed for decades, comfortable and familiar. As they lay together in the darkness, Wyatt pulled her close. "I have been thinking," he said, "about making some changes, maybe doing some traveling while we are still healthy enough to enjoy it. We could visit Sarah in Kansas, maybe go to California to see the ocean. The ranch will be fine without us for a few weeks. William and his wife are more than capable." "I would like that," Thea said. "I never thought I would have the chance to travel again after I came west. It would be wonderful to see new places with you." "Then we will plan it," Wyatt said. "Maybe in the spring after calving season is finished. We have earned the right to enjoy ourselves a bit, I think." They made plans and talked about possibilities until Thea felt herself drifting toward sleep. Just before she went under, she murmured, "I am so glad I got on that stagecoach all those years ago. I am so glad I chose hope over despair." "So am I," Wyatt whispered back. "So am I." The years that followed brought both joys and sorrows, as years inevitably do. They traveled as they had planned, seeing Sarah and her family in Kansas, visiting California and marveling at the Pacific Ocean, taking a trip to Chicago where Thomas lived while establishing his law practice. They welcomed more grandchildren, each one a new source of wonder and delight. They dealt with the challenges of aging bodies that could not work as hard as they once had, learning to accept help and delegate responsibilities that they had once handled themselves. In 1915, as the world was being torn apart by war in Europe, Thea and Wyatt celebrated their 43rd wedding anniversary. They were in their 60s now, gray and wrinkled but still sharp-minded and engaged with life. The ranch continued to thrive under William's management, adapting to changing times and new technologies while maintaining the core values his parents had instilled. The anniversary celebration was a large affair, with family and friends gathering from all over the region. There were people there who had known Thea from her first days at Three Rivers Ranch, who remembered her arrival and watched her transformation from frightened refugee to confident ranch woman. There were younger people who had grown up hearing stories of Wyatt and Thea's courtship and marriage, who saw them as examples of what love and partnership could achieve. During the celebration, Catherine stood to share some words about her parents. She had grown into a confident, accomplished woman, respected in her field and beloved by her family. "When I was a child," she said, "I thought all marriages were like my parents'. I thought everyone faced challenges together and supported each other completely and built something meaningful side by side. It was only as I grew older that I realized how rare and special their partnership truly is. They have shown all of us what it means to build a life on a foundation of hope, hard work, mutual respect, and deep abiding love. They are our example and our inspiration, and we are all blessed to have them." The words brought tears to many eyes, including Thea's own. She reached for Wyatt's hand and he squeezed it gently, his eyes bright with emotion. They had built something remarkable, not through grand gestures or dramatic actions, but through thousands of small daily choices to honor their commitment, support each other, and work toward shared goals. The legacy they were leaving was not just material prosperity, but a template for how to build a lasting marriage and a meaningful life. As 1920 arrived, and they entered a new decade, Thea and Wyatt settled more fully into their role as the family's elders. They spent their days reading, receiving visits from children and grandchildren, and watching the ranch continue to evolve. Wyatt still rode out occasionally to check on the cattle and land, though he tired more easily than he once had. Thea still kept the household accounts and managed correspondence, her mind sharp even as her body grew more frail. They talked often about their life together, remembering the early days and marveling at how far they had come. Sometimes they would pull out old photographs, looking at images of themselves as young people, and trying to reconcile those vibrant figures with the older people they had become. But the love between them had not aged or diminished. If anything, it had grown deeper and more profound with each passing year, enriched by shared experiences and mutual support through all of life's ups and downs. One evening in the summer of 1925, Thea was not feeling well. She had been tired for several days, and Wyatt insisted on sending for the doctor despite her protests that she was fine. The doctor examined her and spoke privately with Wyatt, and when he left, Wyatt's face was pale and strained. "Tell me," Thea said quietly when Wyatt came to sit beside her bed. "Your heart," Wyatt said, his voice breaking slightly. "He says it is weak and growing weaker, that we should prepare ourselves." Thea reached for his hand. "We have had 53 years together," she said. That is more than most people dream of having. I have no regrets, Wyatt. My only sorrow is knowing that I will leave you behind. Do not talk like that, Wyatt said fiercely. You are strong. You have overcome everything life has thrown at you. You will overcome this too. But they both knew the truth, even if Wyatt could not yet accept it. Thea lived through the fall and into the winter, growing gradually weaker but still mentally sharp and still finding joy in her family. All of her children came to visit, bringing their families. She held her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, sharing stories of the early days and making sure they understood the values that had guided her life. One December evening, with Wyatt holding her hand and her children gathered around her bed, Thea quietly slipped away. She was 73 years old, and she died surrounded by the love she had spent a lifetime building. Her last words, whispered to Wyatt, were, "Thank you for everything. I love you forever." Wyatt was devastated by her loss. For 53 years, she had been his partner, his best friend, his love. The ranch that had once brought him such joy now felt empty without her presence. But he was sustained by his family and by the knowledge that they had lived a remarkable life together. He continued for another 3 years, watching his grandchildren grow and seeing the ranch continue to prosper, but part of him had died with Thea. In the spring of 1928, Wyatt followed his beloved wife into whatever comes after this life. He was 76 years old, and he died peacefully in his sleep. On his bedside table was the daguerreotype of Thea's parents that had fallen into the street that first day they met, which Thea had treasured all her life and which Wyatt had kept close after her death. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking Patterson Ranch, under a sky that stretched infinite and blue just as it had the night Wyatt first told Thea he loved her. Their headstone was simple and read, Wyatt James Patterson and Thea Rose Patterson. They arrived with nothing but hope and built a legacy that endures. Beloved partners in life and love. The ranch continued to thrive for generations, passing down through their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The values Thea and Wyatt had established remained at its core. Hard work, integrity, partnership, and the belief that hope and determination could overcome any obstacle. People still told stories about the young woman who arrived in Galesburg with nothing and the cowboy who saw her potential and offered her a chance. They told stories about a love that lasted over 5 decades and a partnership that transformed raw land into a thriving legacy. In the end, that was perhaps the greatest testament to their life together. Not the acres they accumulated or the wealth they built, but the example they set and the love they shared and the belief they proved true time and time again. That hope is indeed all anyone needs to build a life together, as long as that hope is paired with determination, honesty, mutual respect, and enduring love. Thea and Wyatt Patterson had arrived with nothing but hope, and they had built everything that mattered. Their story became legend in the region, a reminder that the greatest adventures often begin with a chance encounter, and a willingness to believe that something better is possible.